there are certain things to be considered about it. One is that there is what we call consciousness involved in the nature of thusness. Thusness is transparent and reverberating. And the other was that within this domain there is room for an enormous number of value games. But you must remember that value games are games. Now let me just review those 2 points slightly because they're tremendously important. First of all, we've got into the habit of thinking of the world as a physical continuum which is not really a continuum, which is divided into the inert things and the earth things, into the conscious and the unconscious, the living and the dead, the organic and the inorganic. And the mythology of the 19th century was to make it a case that everything was really inorganic, see? And that consciousness is something actually purely mineral and metallic, only it's so complicated and so it's got all kinds of liquid and gooey things in it. But they're basically minerals, and they're basically machinery, and it's all like that, you see? And I say the objection to that point of view is simply, it's a way of looking down your nose at things. In fact, it's an objection. The objection to it is that it's an objection. We won't go into such embarrassing questions as who objects. But the thing is that it's, when you construe the whole universe in an objectionable way, the person who does this is really saying, I want to be miserable. Now, you're perfectly entitled to be miserable. Or I want to be realistic and miserable in that sense. And that's perfectly okay if that's the way you want to be. But he has absolutely no right whatsoever to say that his point of view is more valid than ours when we say the opposite. That actually the universe is a continuum of whatever it is, thusness, and that there's a spectrum in which there are the very conscious things and the only slightly conscious things. But all of it is conscious. And so that when you ring a bell and ears get this as ting, the bell itself gets it as a state of vibration, which is a very simple form of consciousness, but there it is. So you don't have to explain, you don't have to invent a ghastly problem, which is, how did anything conscious ever get into this mechanism? It's a simpler thing that it always was there. Everything is conscious, but conscious in very many differing degrees. I don't really know whether that's a simpler explanation than another. I mean, somebody could, I suppose, scratch their heads a while and say, how do you get from one degree to another? See, they want to know how you get from the unconscious rock to the conscious living being. And I say, that's no problem. They're just different degrees of the same thing. Well, he says, how do you get from one degree to another? And has he recreated all over again the same problem we started with? Maybe he has. But if he has, you can see a new line on the thing, that this man's function is to create problems, is to make interesting difficulties. He's like a person who makes up the puzzle, the crossword puzzle every day for the newspaper. There's a man just setting difficulties for you. And you love to get over them, or else it doesn't interest you because you are playing the game, my game's more interesting than yours. But nevertheless, for some reason or other, the idea of a spectrum, of a somewhat more or somewhat less of the same thing, seems to make a great deal of sense. It seems more plausible than the idea of having to have two completely different substances, a stuff called matter and a stuff called spirit or mind or something like that, and try and see how they work upon one another. If you see, in other words, let's take the beautiful image of the fern. First of all, a stalk, just a thing like that. More of them. but coming out of the sides. And then out of the sides of those, more stalks, out of the sides of those, you see? And then out of the sides of all those little ones come little ones still, see? And you say, well, look at that. It's getting very spiky, isn't it? Full of spines. And then gradually, right on the edge of the spines, the more go until they're all going like this way, more and more and more and more, until it becomes soft and hairy, see? And suddenly you've got what you'd call a vegetable.
10 years on, in 1989, they interviewed the same individuals again. The results were absolutely staggering. They found that those 13% who set some goals but hadn't had them down on paper were making twice as much as the 84% who had never set a goal. And even more staggering was the fact that the 3% who had committed goals written on paper had actually been making more money than the 97% put together. Today's session is all about how you can make those goals. I'm going to share with you 3 questions that will help you reflect on the goals that maybe you've already set for the new year, or maybe goals that you're about to set. The first question you need to ask yourself is, are your goals too vague and are they not specific enough? The reason why I ask this is because maybe one of your goals is to get fit. Now, when you say that, do you mean as fit as a model? Do you mean as fit as Cristiano Ronaldo? Do you mean as fit as an athlete? How do you define fit? Or is it just fit enough to walk up your stairs without feeling tired? Becoming more specific about the goals you want to achieve means that you're more likely to understand how much planning is involved in terms of time and resources, and how you're going to make it fit into your incredibly busy week. Try to make your goals as specific as possible. The second question you need to ask yourself is, are your goals too grand to be achievable? Now, I'm a big believer in defining your destiny and reaching and accomplishing your goals, but Bill Gates said a fantastic piece of wisdom that I want to share with you. He said that actually people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. We always feel that we can make a bigger change quickly by impulsively acting, rather than building blocks that will actually be great foundations for future success. What you need to do this year is actually try and find digestible blocks of work, little pieces of action that will help you effectively bring about change in small areas of your life. When these add up and build together, you gain momentum, and that will affect things in the future for you as well. The third question you need to ask yourself is, are you surrounded by the right people, and are you influenced by the right people? If, for example, your goal is to give up chocolate, it won't help if you work at a chocolate factory, you live next to a chocolate manufacturer, your best friend loves chocolate, and you're making chocolate cake on the weekends. It's just not going to be possible. You need to be spending time with people who have the same goal, but also people who've achieved that goal and made it into a habit. Are you aware of the little milestones that you need to reach to incentivize you daily? We need to feel inspired by our goals every day. And if you're feeling that your goal is too far away, or a tangible outcome is in too far a distance, you need to make it closer.